Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of our 2025 Wild Horse Summit, putting the A in advocacy, arming yourself with knowledge to effectively advocate in 2025. We've had a great 2 days so far, and I think today is going to be just as fantastic, and we're really looking forward to it. I'm especially looking forward to our first presenter today. I'm a bit jealous that she gets to travel as much as she does to photograph wild horses around Europe. And I hope one day, if she's able to come to the United States, that I'm able to maybe join up with her and take her out to see some of our horses here in the US. So we're going to start today with Cecile Zahorka. Um, Cecile is known as the Pixel Nomad. She's a renowned equine photographer and author based in Germany. Through her projects, Forgotten Horses and Free Horses, she travels across Europe and beyond to uncover rare and endangered horse breeds, shedding light on disappearing unique heritage and preserving diversity. Her work highlights the unique traditions of keeping horses extensively seasonally free or in semi-wild conditions. In addition, several feral populations thrive across Europe, facing challenges in some areas while being embraced in others. This journey into Europe's wilder side reveals the free roaming horses, their struggles, their benefits, and the remarkable efforts to ensure their survival. Europe is far wilder than it seems.
Thank you so
All
much,
right,
Heather.
Cecile, go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much also everybody for joining. And also hello to those watching later on YouTube. So my name is Cecile, and let's start with a little trailer I made.
Are there any wild horses left in Europe? It's a question that sparks our imagination. Images of untamed herds running freely across vast landscapes come to our mind. But what is the reality? Where do horses in Europe come from? Their story begins with cave paintings and carvings, thousands of years old. These ancient imagery show the deep connections between humans and horses, a bond that shaped our history. In Europe, the idea of free horses is deeply rooted in tradition. From managed taboo in Eastern Europe to the semi-wild herds of France, free horses are a testament to centuries of cultural and ecological practices. They're not just a part of nature, they're a part of us. Truly wild horses, like the tarpan, have been extinct in Europe for centuries. But the romantic vision of wild horses never faded. Through selective breeding, humans have recreated breeds that echo the wild horses of the past, like the hack horse or the Dülmen horse, for example. Yet the reality is much more complex. Today, the concept of free horses in Europe includes a wide variety of traditions, breeds, and practices, blending wilderness with human stewardship in surprising ways. Let's explore the diverse ways free horses live in Europe today, between tradition and wilderness. In Portugal, the Alta Lusitano exemplifies centuries-old traditions of free-ranging horses, cared for in expensive pastures. The Haflinger represents seasonal grazing systems, such as the transhumance, where horses roam the Alps freely during the summer before returning to human care in winter. Selective breeding in natural conditions has shaped breeds like the Camargue horse in France or the hardy Husul horse in the Carpathians. These horses thrive in semi-natural environments, blending human care with nature's touch. In regions like northern Spain or Portugal, semi-wild horses such as the Guarano or the Asturian live in minimal human interference, maintaining their natural instincts. In rewilding projects, breeds like the Conic horse in Eastern Europe or Soraya horse in Portugal are managed to mimic the roles of extinct wild horses, helping restore ecosystems. Truly feral horses, like those in Livno, Bosnia, or in the Sierra Nevada in Spain, live without human management, wild in behavior, though descendant from domestic ancestors. Truth about free horses in Europe is complex, a delicate balance between tradition and wilderness, shaped by history, culture, and conservation. And that's why I don't call them wild horses. Instead, I call them free horses. Because they represent freedom in many forms: freedom of movement, freedom from strict human control, and freedom to continue the traditions that connect us to nature. Let's explore the free horses of Europe between tradition and wilderness.
All right, so that was just a head start to give you a little idea what the presentation will be about. And the goals of this presentation is to inspire you and to showcase the free horses in Europe and to learn that horses can also be a heritage and cultural icons, to explore successful management and successful case studies, and to maybe advocate and use this knowledge or these inspirations for your free horse management, regardless of the breed or the origin. So, a few words about me. I'm Cecile Zahorka, and I'm a creative artist, but I'm also a designer and a marketing expert. And I actually have a focus on luxury marketing and destination branding. And I live in Germany, but I'm German and French. And during my studies, I had the chance to live some time in South Africa and Portugal. And in general, I call Europe my home. And I can get quite passionate about things. And because I'm also very curious and love to research everything, and you will see about this in this presentation. So I also have an equestrian background, and Haflinger horses are these horses from the Alps. They were basically my first love. And in Germany and Austria, they are often ridiculed as a fat pony and good for nothing, and they have a very bad reputation. So naturally, Haflinger horses were my main subject in photography, and I felt that I need to change something here. Okay, sorry. And I felt that through my photography, I can reveal their true potential. So I started to photograph Haflinger horses in a way that people would fall in love with them. And in this time, I also started to travel not only in Germany, but also to the neighboring countries to discover the most beautiful places and also Haflinger horses, because I wanted to explore photography and horses. A good friend of mine during that time was one of the most successful dressage riders with Haflinger horses and competing with them in highest levels. And there were not many Haflinger horses competing. So I knew her and I knew what these horses are capable of. So I started to wonder if there's maybe more to this breed. By giving horses a chance to show their potential, to show their versatility, and also to photograph them. So I started photographing horses, Haflinger horses in dressage, in show jumping, in driving, in western riding, eventing, horse race, and all these disciplines you can find in shows. And I also did different shows for breeding horses like stallion selections. And it was a very fun time. But one thing about the Haflinger horse that captured me the most were the free roaming horses in the Alps, in the Austrian and Italian mountains during the summer. And this is a tradition we call Almsommer. So photographing Haflinger horses in the mountains was for me something of a turning point, because seeing them in freedom and not just as wild, but they're free, that sparked quite a deep curiosity about this topic. And they live free for at least 3 months a year on quite a high altitude. And they're also exposed to harsh conditions in the Alps because the weather can be very brutal there sometimes. And although they're normal stabled horses, they're the same horses I photographed in all these competition. They were in the mountains living there. And the only contact there is done by the owners or by a shepherd, like the guy on the picture, who look after them from time to time. He feeds them here with some salt and minerals and just to be able to check on them. And he does the same, by the way, with cattle and goats because they all share the same mountain pastures. So one day I stumbled upon a report by the FAO about endangered horse breeds, and it actually shocked me. It's a report about livestock worldwide, and that also includes horses. And seeing that horses, cows, even dogs or animals so close to us are endangered somehow actually really shocked me. And I cannot understand that only 7% of all these animals are safe. I found out that there are actually some societies and nonprofits trying to protect these animals, and one of them is in Germany and has established a red list about endangered in German livestock and horses. And you will find same or equivalent societies in the US and Canada, Australia, and Britain, for example. There were about 20 horse breeds on that list, and most of their names were quite unknown to me. So I got a publication about these horses from the society, and these were the kind of photos. I mean, I don't want to ridicule the work of these peoples, but most likely they had no better pictures and they did what they can. But this is not how you fall in love with horses, to save them somehow. So I thought, okay, I can do this better. There are just 20 horses on that list, right? So I went and tried to find these endangered horses, which is quite difficult because there aren't many, and obviously they are not quite well documented. So one of the first sessions was with this Pfalzardenner draft horse. It's a breed that doesn't even show up on the red list. They are supposed to be extinct since the mid 1990s, but here they are, about 120 horses in the total population. And then this makes me wonder if this list is actually complete or is there maybe more? So I went back to the FAO report and found the data only for the horses, and the Pfalzardenner also didn't show up on their list at that time. So I knew that also the FAO report is not complete. So I started my own list since 2018, and I update them on a regular basis and with all horse breeds, types, and populations all over the world. And yes, it has more than 1,300 lines. And just this week, I found out about another breed in Kazakhstan. So there's a lot more to be discovered. And yeah, guess what? There are more than 20 breeds that are endangered, of course. In my own research, I isolated the numbers of horses and their risk status on the main base of the FAO numbers. And I currently found that the FAO counts 833 breeds. And just to give you a reference, the largest books about horses quote 550 breeds in the world. So also all these books are not complete at all. 37 breeds are at risk, 55% are unknown, and only 8% of all horses worldwide are considered as safe. My list has about 500 more entries, and that's just means that there's so much to explore and there's little scientific research behind all this. So it also starts you also start to wonder why are horses endangered? And the reasons are quite complex, and there would be a whole presentation on its own, but to make it short, economic pressures have led to the decline of workhorses, which targets mostly draft horses. Many breeds no longer fit into our modern societies where you look for performance horses mostly. But most of them are simply not seen anymore and they are quite forgotten to the equestrian world. So even if you're open to find another breed, you don't even know that they exist. And the main problem is that they lost their purpose. And by that, they lost their value. And by that, they are not economically relevant anymore and to be part of our modern times. But I believe photography and education can help change this by reconnecting people with these forgotten horses. And that's why I called my project Forgotten Horses. So since then, I've photographed more than 130 breeds and endangered horses, and I published my photos on my website and social media under the name of The Pixel Nomad. And I've recently published my first book, which is quite exciting. And along all the way of researching so many horse breeds on forgotten horses, I noticed a recurring theme. I went to explore the Exmoor ponies in the UK, which is an endangered breed and quite known all over the world to be roaming the moors all year. They are giving birth in the wilderness and they're growing up without too much human interference. And just like the Exmoor pony, many of these endangered breeds are also free. So continuing my research, I of course crossed the path of the Konik Polski, a horse often found in so many nature reserves, mostly marketed as a wild horse. It was a good place to get spectacular shots of fighting stallions. But one thing that that I never really liked was that the term of wild horse is in combination with the Konik Polski, because you can see they are in the core just another horse breed and not so different from others. In Poland, kids are learning to ride on them and do all the sorts of stuff and fun, having fun. So how can you market them as a wild horse in Europe? And the more I researched, the more I realized that there exists even a bigger diversity of breeds and types of free horses in Europe. And the world seems to know so little about them, also in Europe. And because the term wild horse is maybe not correct, for example, for the Haflinger horse in the mountains, I simply call them free horses because wild horse is quite complicated. So let's have a look where free horses actually come from. Wild horses have been part of human fascination since the beginning of time. So some of the earliest artworks humans created are the cave paintings, for example, in Chauvet in France, Écaïne, Lascaux, and Nio, and they all depict horses. And these images reflect how central horses were to our ancestors' imagination and to survival, and somehow also formed an early form of culture. The domestication began maybe 6,000 years ago in the Eurasian steppe, so the region between Europe and Asia. The early domesticated horses weren't kept in stables. Instead, they roamed freely in herds, managed and guarded by horseback shepherds. And this is a tradition called taboon. The system of an open range stud with large herds is, as I said, called taboon and is still practiced in Mongolia, in Russia, in Eastern Europe, and such as in this picture with the Husul horses in Hungary. So you can imagine, isn't it a dream job to just sit on the horse all day and observe and guard the herd? So, but this guy doesn't really look romantic, so I thought I show you this one. He's a bit prettier. And just to be clear, the whip is not to hurt the animals, but to make a loud noise, and that's how they start to move the horse herd. They are galloping and shepherding, basically, herds, just sitting on the horse. So what happened to the wild horse in Europe? Sadly, they did die out. The tarpan, Europe's last wild horse, is extinct today and quite for some time. We don't really know how they looked like because the only pictures that exist are not so much better than the cave paintings, and I don't think the horse actually looked like on this painting. You will find this picture as the only existing photo in the internet. However, it is doubtful if this is really a wild horse having a bridle with a bit and also the long mane, because genetic studies revealed and confirmed that the wild horse had a standing mane. So it's more likely that this one was already a mixed horse, and it's probably also the reason why the wild horse died out, because they were mixed and also because they were hunted. So still, this photo has been the base of a lot of discussion about what a wild horse in Europe looked like. So we will come to this in a minute. So wild horse mixed with domestic horses, or domestic horses somehow ran away and mixed with wild ones, and they were creating these so-called primitive breeds. And DNA evidence confirms this in breeds like the Astucon in Spain, which who has a mitochondrial lineage which traces back to the wild ancestors. It is quite safe to say that domestic herds basically replaced the wild herds in a time frame for about 2000 years in Europe. So this is the Astrocon, and I will give you more examples of these ancient breeds that can be found all over Europe. The Husul horse in Poland and Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary. This is the Garano horse in Portugal. The Exmoor pony in the UK. The Caballo Gallego in Galicia in Spain. This is the Bosnian mountain horse from Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Lucino horse in Spain. The Merins horse from France is a bit taller. And the Potiok in Spain and France is a bit of a smaller version. And you see they have more or less the same type, all of them. And the Monchino in Spain. And maybe you have also noticed that all these breeds are bay or black colored. So makes you wonder, what about this one? So I've already mentioned in the beginning that the Konik Polski is used in many nature reserves because it resembles the extinct tarpan. For quite some time, there has been a myth that the Konik is the direct descendant. DNA analysis did not confirm this, so this is not correct. The Konik is not a different breed to any of the other breeds. Their origin is in Poland, and they are based on the Panie horse. It was a small horse, more or less, of the same time of the region of Eastern Germany and Poland. However, the Konik Polski was somehow romanticized to resemble the tarpan, the wild tarpan horse, somewhere in the 19th century or in the beginning of the 20th century. And this somehow marked the beginning of the wild horse romance. So when people wanted to breed back the wild horse. One of them is the hack horse, and they were also created by mixing different breeds, such as the Konik Polski, and in the attempt to breed back the tarpan horse. And people at that time were quite confident that they could simply achieve this. And of course, we all know you cannot breed back extinct species, but they thought by just selecting horses that were of this mouse gray dun color with the dorsal stripe and the two-colored mane and the zebra markings on the legs, they could bring back the wild horse. And more of these projects were created, and this has been quite a trend. And here is, for example, the Liebenthaler Wildling, which is also from Germany. They thought, yeah, just the horse looks like a white horse and you put them in a big pasture, so it must be a white horse. Easy. So at the same time, they brought the only known wild horse to extinction in the wild. And this is a picture of the Przewalski horse or Przewalski horse, or in Mongolia, you call them Tachi. And they survived only in zoos and recently were brought back to Asia. So it is important here that this is not a horse breed, and this is a different species of a horse. They have a different amount of chromosomes, for example. They may be the ancestors or uncles of our horses today, but just you can compare it like the wolf and the dog. Bringing the dog back to the wilderness wouldn't make the dog a wolf again. And if you remember these cave paintings I showed you in the beginning, there is a big resemblance between the Przewalski horse and the cave paintings. And the Przewalski horse is also the only successful reintroduced wild horse in Mongolia and Europe. And it's also the biggest success story of rewilding a species that was extinct in the wild. So that's quite interesting to look into it. But the resemblance, for example, of the Exmoor pony is also quite striking, especially when the wind blows up their manes and it looks like they have a standing mane. So this is a reason why this breed is also very popular in nature reserves and has a reputation to be used for grazing, or maybe they were also marketed by the right people for this. However, I personally don't give too much on these paintings because they're like 40,000 years old or 15,000 years old, and there can be found a resemblance to basically any breed. And also, these paintings often don't even have a head or legs, so they're not very accurate. And people are using them as a base for discussions to argue which breed is the oldest in Europe. But yeah. So just so you know. And there's another backbreeding attempt for the Taurus or the Auer ox. This is a cattle that was also extinct and goes hand in hand with the conic horse or the Exmoor horse or all these backbreeding initiatives. So just as a side note. So where are all these free horses in Europe? Pretty much everywhere, and there are more than you think. And with my data, I tried to create this map, but it's not even close to being complete. And there are still more, and especially when you go in the direction of Asia, there should be a lot of these pins. So if you remember the video in the beginning, I introduced some different types of free horses, and I thought we have a look at this now because through my research, I identified 6 main categories of free horses in Europe. So in the beginning, I was talking about the Alter Real Lusitano in Portugal, and this is basically the base. It's extensive keeping. Then you have seasonal horses, seasonal free horses like the Hafting horse in the Alps. They go there in summer and in winter they are stabled. Then there you can call one category extensive breeding, which is done, for example, with the Camargue horse in France. There are semi-wild horses like the Astrakhan in Spain. There are horses managed as wild, and these are mainly the horses in nature reserves. And last but not least, there are feral horses you can find also in Europe. And let's have a look at each of these categories in detail. And of course, it's also very important to keep in mind that they are very fluid. So the borders aren't, these are no strict categories. There are breeds that can be in all of these categories. So first, extensive keeping can be horses that live outdoors all year and remain free with regular checks, and they grow healthy social horses and make great horses for everybody. And I think actually this should be the base. Every horse breed should have, but sadly, not every horse has the space to roam free, like in these big studs. Like I said, the Lusitano in Portugal, it's the oldest Lusitano line in this historic stud, and they roam as a big herd in huge pastures. They get driven back every day to the stud farm, and they know their way, and it's part of their routine. And these horses, they have their inner clock telling them when to go back. So this is how it looks like from above when they go into their yard and stable. And then once they're in the stable, they're fed and cleaned and checked. And here they can check the individual horse. And when they have foals, they will check the foals, mark them, etc. And then a few hours later, they will be released again, and they chill out all the way back to the pasture. There's absolutely no hurry in it. But once they're back in their pasture, they say, okay, goodbye, see you tomorrow. And yeah, off they are. And you can also notice that there are a lot of olive trees. All these trees are olive trees, and they're used for the olive oil production. So basically the pasture is also agricultural terrain. They have two things they use, the horses and the olive oil, which I think is interesting. So the next category would be the Haflinger horse, the seasonal free horse. Like I said in the beginning, the Haflinger, they are used in the transhumance. And the transhumance is a practice, a very old tradition to bring livestock in the summer on higher pastures and in winter to lower ones. And the landscape also benefits of it, and somehow also the biodiversity of it, because they keep this open landscapes. So here are some clips of Haflinger horses on 2,400 meters. I'm sorry, I don't know the feet, but it's quite high. As you can see, this was June and you still have snow in the mountains. And they only stay until October because you will have too much snow up there. And also in summer, the conditions are already harsh enough, but the horses manage, and these horses are ridden and used for everything. So here, for example, this foal is crossing for the first time the ice-cold glacier river, and so they will learn a lot for their future as a riding horse. And in Austria, for example, many people bring their horses back to the Alm in summer to give them a break or a summer holiday, they call it sometimes. And their horses seem to enjoy it a lot. So it's a nice thing to do. The next category would be the extensive breeding. And this is basically a system that laid the groundwork for most European horse breeds we know today. We call them wild studs, and the herds live outside all year with a selected stallion. So this used to be like the taboo I mentioned earlier with these shepherds that or they you can do it with fencing a large area or by installing a water source next to a stable and thereby bonding the herd to a specific location. Of course, today there aren't many wild studs anymore, which is very sad. This used to be a big thing until the 19th century in Europe. But one of the most famous wild studs is in Germany, and it is the Dülmener Wildpferd. And there are about 350 mares and foals in this place, which used to be unfenced, but as the land gets claimed by cities, most wild studs lost their habitat, and so they had to change, unfortunately, and adapt. So the Dülmener horse is still in this huge pasture, and it's very impressive to see so many horses. I mean, 300 horses, it's nothing you see in a regular base. And as you can see, they are dun colored and they have this, let's say, desired look of the wild horse with the zebra markings on the legs, and they have the dorsal stripe and the two-colored mane and tail. And this is not a coincidence. And it hasn't always been the case because many colors got selected out as the ones on the picture. So the mouse gray dun colored remained in the herd to make them look more iconic. And it also shows that even these large studs are subject to selective breeding and not only natural reproducing as many claim. So these horses in the pictures used to be in the same herd and now are in the same location to have, fortunately, some people are conserving also these horses with these lovely different shades of the dun color. And for wild studs, it's very typical to share the field with cattle, by the way. And it brings us to our second example, the Camargue horse. Their fields are the marshes and river deltas in France, for example. You can't do anything else in these places because it's just water and marshland. And you breed the horses basically on this terrain, which has no value. But these horses thrive in the poor land. And you maybe have seen pictures like this one before of these white horses running through the water or some crazy stallion fights. And they are often marketed as wild horses in the Camargue, but of course they are not wild because all of this is choreography. And behind the Camargue horse stands an excellent marketing, making them into an icon for a whole region. We will talk about this later. And they are also together with these guys, the famous black bulls, and I will also talk about them later. I'm just trying to create some suspension here about the topic cattle and horses. So other examples to wild starts are, for example, these hot-blooded riding horses in Hungary and Eastern Europe, such as the Kispers Felver, which is in the picture, or the Gidran, they're called Hungarian half-blood. And they roam the pastures around the stud farm, and they can return when they want. There are no fences. And if they don't return home on their own, the horseback shepherds will bring them, you know, the guy with the whip I showed you in the beginning. And this brings us to the semi-wild breeds or semi-wild systems, which are closer to nature, and they kind of need to survive on their own. They have minimal contact to humans, but every owner or breeder has different rules or traditions on rounding up or on checking horses. And basically, semi-wild horses are shaped by natural selection, even if the owner selects the breeding animals, because only the strongest will survive and they have to deal with predators in some places. So I already mentioned the Astacon, which have this ancient DNA, and most of them are kept in the mountains of Asturias in Spain all year. And they never got, the wolf never got extinct in this region, so you will find a lot of horses also have to deal with the wolf and predators. And the stallion is part of the band, and you will find several bands in one region or several groups, breeding groups in one region, and the owner will take out some of the young horses each year to keep the population stable, and the wolf also takes its toll, of course. But not only hardy ponies can be bred in semi-wild conditions, especially in Spain. You also have these draft horses roam in the mountains with one stallion and a group of mares, and multiple of these groups are in the same region. And these breeds were created mostly in the 19th century and on the base of local mountain horses, so they kept these rustic characteristics. And it happens from time to time that the horses and these groups meet. Oops, sorry. And here are three different groups of three different breeds meeting, and the stallions know each other, and there are no big fights. They're quite social. It's only the bachelors that challenge fights. So they take out the young stallions to keep horses also calm. Here's now the video, but nothing actually happens. They just look at each other. That's it. Not so spectacular. But in other places, like here, the Caballo Gallego in Spain and Galicia, simply roam in the mountains all year with minimal contact. There are no fences, but horses rarely go to the village. And there are also cattle, as you can see. These horses are adapted to eat spiky shrubs, so plants that are so spiky they almost rip your pants when you hike there, and it gives them this funny looking mustache style to some of the horses. And this is how it looks like. And when they eat them as if, yeah, it must be very spiky, and they grow these very furry mouth. And they are very important to graze in the mountains by eating all the dry grass and bushes and maintaining a landscape and help to reduce fires, which is a big problem in Southern Europe. So the next category is very interesting because I call them managed as wild, and basically rewilding projects are doing this by reconnecting horses into ecosystems and allow them to thrive in their natural roles and take the place of the extinct wild horse. So you will find them in mostly nature reserves or any kind of natural project. And often there's no active breeding behind it, although they finally use more of the endangered horse breeds, because mostly they are using the conic horse. And the only difference is that these horses are left to adapt to the place, and they don't really take out the bachelor stallions. So you have a different social structure of these bands and groups as in selective breeding, and where you only have one stallion with a group of mares. So as photographer, these places are great to observe horses and get these crazy spectacular shots, of course. You don't have them in the regular semi-wild horses. And as I said, the foundation of these projects are often registered in stud books, like the Garano in this one. but their offspring is not registered. But since somehow it's a closed-off area, the herds remain pure. And in my opinion, this is a good backup to many breeds, because you never know if you need a backup, in a genetic backup. So thanks to these rewilding projects, local and rare breeds, as the Soraya horse here, have a new purpose. And finally, we also have feral horses in Europe, and they are just as wild as their managed counterparts, but the origins are different. They are mostly in remote areas like mountains, or places that haven't been claimed yet by people, which aren't many anymore in Europe, sadly. So, however, without any owner, the state could capture them and decide about their fate, like keeping them, selling them, or killing them, or whatever. It happens that around these feral herds, people start organizations to protect them by management, or they try to not publish about them at all, so nobody will notice. This also happens. This is the case of this feral herd in Spain. Their origin is not very clear, but Spain is a very mountainous region, and there used to be mountain horse types or breeds in each of these mountain ranges, as I have already introduced a few of them. And they were used as pack horse for driving or transport or any kind of work. And if they were not needed, they were basically released into the mountain. So they were not a particular herd, but when you needed a horse, you went and captured yourself a horse. And over time, they were all captured or crossbred then, and the local breeds kind of died out, or in this case of this herd, they were basically forgotten in the mountains, and nobody really cared because nobody claimed their space, so they continued to live there. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, there's another famous herd in the town of Livno. They are horses that were released after the Second World War, when horses were not needed anymore in farming, for example. So these horses can be big, which indicates their origin in heavier working horses. In the whole Balkan region in Eastern Europe, horses were also released after the Yugoslavian war, so in the 1990s. So you will find some pure Bosnian mountain herds that have survived in the remote areas since this time, so in the past 30 years. And in Livno, there are now about 800 to 1,000 horses, and it's a place where you can observe horse behavior and take photos, because the landscape is very open compared to the mountain areas of many other breeds. So the borders of these categories are very fluid. For example, with the Garano horse, they are bred as well in small farms as a working horse, or today as a leisure horse. They are also semi-wild horses in the mountains. Often they're even gated horses, and nobody really knows about this. And the Garano is also used as wild, or managed as wild in rewilding projects. And you will also find some feral horses and herds of them that were never rounded up somewhere in the mountains in very remote places, because, yeah, they stayed somewhere in the mountains. So this fluid borders, or this fluid concept, reflects basically the complexity of free horses in Europe, that there is a big intersection of wilderness and human intervention. And it's quite interesting to think that diversity of these horse breeds and their different forms of freedom is not only biological, but it's also cultural. It's important to realize, yeah, that it's also a big cultural factor. Just like language, food, clothing, or customs, horse breeds and their uses reflect the culture of the people who raised them. For example, if you are a farmer, you have a heavier, stronger horse than mountain horses. So this is also how the horses after look like. They are basically living cultural artifacts and time capsules of human history and migration. Especially if you look again at the feral horses, you can read the history of the horses, and by reading the history of the horses, you can read the history of the humans. So it's important to understand that they represent the identity of region, where they have been developed and why they have been developed. For example, when we remember the Lusitano mares in the beginning that kept extensive in the pastures all year, the Stad Alta Real is the base of the Portuguese equestrian school of riding. And this school is the base of the Portuguese equestrian art, which is now protected by the UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. In case you didn't know, yes, horses can be recognized as UNESCO heritage. And they are recognized in several places. For example, institutions like the Spanish Riding School in Vienna or the French Equitation in Saumur preserve and celebrate this tradition of equestrian art. And since last year, also in Portugal, and even more specific equestrian games in Morocco. So there are not only the art of riding on horses, which is protected, but also the breeding traditions and the facilities of breeding horses are protected in several breeds. For example, the Lipizzaner horse is a breeding, or the breeding of the Lipizzaner horse, and the Kladruber state stud in the Czech Republic. There's a whole list of this world heritage and intangible cultural heritage and man and biosphere programs on the website of the UNESCO. I will send the link in the chat later again. And the UNESCO recognizes the cultural importance of these horses and related practices, highlighting how many horses remain, or how horses remain central to human culture. So what does this mean for our Lusitano horses we have seen a few times now in this presentation? They are protected as cultural icon. So that's very important to understand that by protecting a heritage like the equestrian art in Portugal, you also have the whole supply chain of this heritage protected. But not every tradition is the UNESCO heritage, which is actually the highest protection. At the moment, only very few ones are UNESCO compared to the huge diversity in the world. So there are plenty of local, regional, or national traditions that ensure the survival of these horse breeds. And I use the Norica horse, this draft horse in this picture, as an example. They are quite similar to the Haflinger because they also have this transhumance tradition of high pastures. And this breed almost died out because nobody needed them as working horses anymore. But the local farmers had so much pride in them and kept them only for the specific tradition and festivals of the region. And my friend Alyssa from the YouTube channel Discover the Horse made this video in Austria, and I couldn't summarize it better. So I'm playing this now.
It's all the traditional events that still involve horses. From traditional archery in Japan, to beautiful horse fairs in Spain, driving traditional carriages in the Netherlands, plowing fields in Denmark, and even shrimping on horseback in Belgium. Horses play such an incredible role in honoring our past, connecting us with our present, and supporting our future.
So, preserving horses as cultural heritage means recognizing their historical roles and promoting the traditions that keep them relevant, as this festival I told you about that saved the Norica horse in Austria. Festivals, events, and even modern equestrian practices can connect communities through their history while ensuring that horse breeds and traditions survive for future generations. How can you do this? Try to get equestrian traditions and practices into heritage lists. I mean, there's, of course, UNESCO, but there are probably others, also local heritage or national heritage. This can be crucial for breeds to survive, such as the draft horse in Austria or the Lipizzaner horse, and now also the Lusitano horse in Portugal, and maybe so many more. So connected to the free horses, I did a little bit of research, and I found some local traditions which are part of the local culture and festivals, which have a lot of meaning to local people. For example, the Dülmener Wildpferd, and it's called Dülmener Wildpferdefang, which translates to wild horse catching. And the herd gets rounded up once a year, and you can see how many people go to this event and be part of it. And there are guys, these guys in blue are rounding up the horses on foot, and it's a big event, and to just be there, and it gets into the TV shows and everything, and it's quite interesting. They isolate the yearling colts and capture them by hand, because they have to do this because they don't have enough space for the herd to build bands and have too many stallions. So they try to do this, and of course, since everybody is looking on it, they try to be soft and have a good horsemanship kind of, and be soft to the horses and kind, as seen here in the video, to not stress them out too much. And after they captured all the young yearling colts, the yearling stallions, the big herd gets released again, like here. They say goodbye, see you next year, and the mares are happy to go away, and these are the colts, and they are sold on the same day. All of them are sold. None of them gets to the slaughterhouse. They are all sold because they're very, people are interested in having a wild horse, basically. And that's the story of the Dülmen horse. And the city of Dülmen stands behind the horses in the Waldstadt, and they elevate them into their iconography by putting the horses into their city logo, and even use the claim City of Wild Horses. So that's quite interesting. Another tradition in Spain, it's quite similar, it's called Rapa das Bestas, with the Caballo Gallego. And it is said that this is one of the oldest roundup traditions in Europe. And people say without the event Rapa das Bestas, there would be no horses in the mountains. And without horses, there would be no tradition. So the horses get rounded up on foot and on horseback, and they get into the Kuro, that's the arena in the village, as we can see here. And they have a lot of folklore traditions, and it's also a huge event. And the horses go inside, and yeah, it's basically the same. They try to catch them. It's very physical. It's a bit, I would say, hotter than in Germany, but still, it's a very important event. And you can see even the children are kind of involved. And then they mark the foals, for example, and you will see they cut off the mane of the horses, which is a tradition because traditionally the horse hair was used to make brushes or all sorts of crafts, and they still do this. It's still the same tradition of cutting the hair and marking the horses. And something completely different is in the New Forest. And a few years ago, I went to the New Forest National Park, which is a very popular place in England and UK. And I experienced the most openly lived coexistence between humans and horses. And I witnessed some very funny scenes. And the bizarre thing was that these horses and the people acted as if it's totally normal to share the same space. I mean, the horses were walking through this beach area like a pigeon would. And horses are everywhere, and they're not fenced out into pastures. They're basically fenced out of the villages. So they have the whole national park to roam. They don't want them too much into their gardens and villages, so they put a fence there, which is actually a nice concept. It feels like these scenes are totally normal, where people stand around, horses are standing around, everybody's minding their own business. And for example, that was so funny. There was this couple, they sat there and ignored a whole bunch of horses passing by, and they were just reading. They were just sitting there and reading. And I was in the middle of it, and I was thinking, how can one read if you are surrounded by so many horses? That's so funny. That was really crazy. So it just shows that these places do exist and everybody is having a good time. And the horse is a central part of the New Forest. And this so-called commoning or these common grounds are considered as community and culture. And I think they did a very good job. They also have their challenges, but in general, it's a positive place. So it makes me wonder, I haven't found any place where sustainable practices are elevated into heritage. And in my opinion, nowadays is the best place or the best time to think about having heritage through sustainability, because horses help the environment. Their grazing maintains open meadows, preventing overgrowth, reducing wildfire risk. I think you have an organization also in the US advocating for this. They create habitats for other species by keeping the landscape diverse. The horses often coexist with other livestock like cattle, goats, sheep, and this co-living system benefits the biodiversity benefits of this co-living system and ensures sustainable land use. And as we have learned, you don't need specific horse breeds for this job, because small horse, big horse, everybody can do this. So there are, of course, challenges for the free horses in Europe. And before we look at the successes, we have to understand the challenges. Many of these challenges overlap with the reasons why so many horse breeds have become endangered or forgotten, in addition to these breed-specific issues, like the draft horses are not needed as workhorses anymore. In general, breeding traditions are in decline in Europe, or maybe everywhere in the world. I'm not sure about that, but here definitely. Horses often lack the public appreciation like they did back in the days. Many areas are losing the land required for free roaming horses, and that's one of the biggest issues. And predator populations like the wolf and the bears are increasing due to conservation efforts, which is also a problem in some places. And in a world where money rules, breeds must have an economic value to survive. So that's a sad thing to think about it, but it is how it is. And I'm very sorry to say this, but people in charge of organizations and people like advocates for free horses also often lack professional marketing skills to win the public and the local support, and by that limiting their ability to protect these animals. And finally, all of these breeds and feral populations are kind of isolated. There is no exchange, there is no network, and they are distributed over a whole continent of different nations and languages. And if somebody does valuable research somewhere in Galicia in Spain about horses and predators, the horses in the remote Carpathian Mountains in Romania will never hear about it. Not even Germans will know about it. And also people in Galicia, not, because the farmers and the scientists don't always communicate with each other. So communication is also a problem. Now, let's go to the positive places. The Camargue region in France offers one of the most successful examples of integrating free horses into a very well-developed tourism and traditions. The iconic Camargue horse, the black bull I showed in the beginning, and the pink flamingo form a unique brand that has drawn global attention since the 1960s. 60s. So these horses are essential for bull management and for traditional festivals. And visitors come to ride horses, to photograph them, to experience the unique environment of the Camargue landscape. And tourism directly supports the preservation of the Camargue horse breeds, showcasing how free horses can thrive when integrated into a well-marketed regional identity. So people in Camargue take pride in their horses and festivals. And this is a picture of the opening ceremony of a workhorse competition. And people are dressing up and they come and show up and everybody loves it. The Camargue horse is a true working horse, and they're quite untouched from modern trends or fashions. And let's call them maybe the original cowboys. It's an old equestrian tradition and art. And it has nothing to do with bullfighting. In the contrary, the bulls in the Camargue are huge and they are quite aggressive, but they are high in value, and you cannot approach them on foot if you love your life. you can only approach them in a car or by horse. And the reason why horses are still in charge is because cars cannot go everywhere, because the Camargue looks like this. It's a huge wetland and you would sink in with every car. So without the cattle, there would be no horse. And without the horse, there would be no cattle management. The Camargue horse and the cattle are dependent on each other a lot. And I think this is a very interesting part to think about and to see. Another good example are the Livno horses in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I have shown you some pictures of them already. And this is also a powerful success story for feral horse population in very recent times. So they were released after the Second World War and the Yugoslavian War, and their numbers always were like 50 to 100 horses in total. And since they were protected maybe 10 or 15 years ago, their population has rebounded to 800 to 1,000 horses. And the recovery of them created a new industry of tourism with horse safaris, quad tours, guided wildlife, and experiences supporting the local economy. For example, you can book them on TripAdvisor, and people recognize the value of these horses and they made a big business out of it. And it's totally okay. It works perfect for everybody, and everybody's happy with these feral horses in Livno in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So conservation happens also through services and workshops. Also, for example, I talked about it, the photography part, that people have booked photo tours in Camargue a lot. And now also in Livno, for example, there are team building workshops and services like mental health groups centered about the three horses, just observing them and healing, or horse observations, and all these things create income streams and they give the horses a value, and it is a value that can be measured in euro or in dollars or like in money. And this is what people understand. Actually, this is a value people understand because you can measure it, and emotions you cannot measure, but money you can measure. So team building and sponsorship concepts happening, for example, now also with the Bosnian mountain horse. It's a way to keep financing the conservation of the breed, and I hope they will succeed. It's a quite new concept they do. And there's also another thing happening right now in Turkey, in a region called Cappadocia. And it's a thing that people like to go there to take wedding pictures or couple photos with a large herd. And it's a business there. You can rent this herd to take pictures. And of course, you can also rent a photographer. And the region now is marketed as a destination for couple photographers or Instagram photos, and of course, also photo tours. So that's also quite an interesting thing to consider. Of course, we talked about the ecologic part of horses, but you can also be a visitor. As a visitor, you can book wildlife safaris to observe horses alongside other species, like the taurus cattle, the lynx, the wolf, the eagles, the vultures, you name it. There's a new European style safari industry evolving, and horses are playing a part of it, mainly in the rewilding network of Europe. And one of these links also gives you some introduction about the comeback of the horse in this network. It's quite interesting to read. Of course, we talked about the biodiversity in wildfire prevention, that horses play a crucial role. And I think that's also very important to know that horses are together with livestock, and they are basically both of them maintain ecosystems that are resilient to fire and also promote biodiversity. And yes, they go well together in Europe, and you don't have to remove them for cattle, for example. Horses are raised in free or semi-wild conditions to develop into robust and resilient animals, and they are healthier. They require fewer vet bills or interventions. They have strong social and mental stability. And for example, in Germany, there is a place where they are now using German sports horses in grazing projects instead of ponies. And they do the same job as the ponies, and they are successful in breeding them and selling them to a higher price. And it just shows that any horse raised extensively can do this kind of job of grazing, and they have fewer health problems. And in times where veterinary bills are very expensive, at least in Germany, I don't know in the US, but here it's insane now, you want to have a healthy horse. So it is very important that it opens ideas. So a quick excursion to the Icelandic horse. The Icelandic horse is not only a national symbol, but also a significant contributor to Iceland's economy. In 2020, Iceland exported more than 2,300 horses with a value of $11 million. And of these $11 million, of course, the economy benefits of taxes. And this is also a reason why the Icelandic government and the locals love the horse and give them a strong support, because the horse is a national icon, not only because it's a gated breed, but also because they're part of the Icelandic nature, and most horses are bred freely, and they also roam free, and they're part of the photo tourism or equestrian tourism. But as I said, they also contribute to the economy. And it's very hard to find numbers about horse breeds, but if you're into this, have a look into the Icelandic horse economic contributions. And as I said, horses need to pay somehow into the system to create value, and for the politicians to see their value. And that's maybe also a thing to think about. And last but not least, you need to education. And this education plays a crucial role in the future of endangered horses, because many children develop their first connection to horses or horse breeds in riding schools and fall in love with them. Like I fell in love with the Huffing horse, and they form lifelong bonds with specific breeds. And by introducing horses from rare breeds or free herds, for example, into equestrian schools, we don't only give these horses a purpose, but also create an educational mission. And children learn about the importance of these breeds and their connection to culture and nature, and the value of protecting them. So in this photo, there is the Italian Monteruffoli pony, which is a free roaming horse in Tuscany. And the breeding farm also uses them in the riding school. And this just shows that how you win the heart of the locals and inspire future generations to care for this equestrian heritage. So investing in education and the youth ensures that the conservation efforts will have a lasting support. So to sum up, free horses bring a wide range of benefits. They attract tourists and contributes to the economy. They make healthy horses that cost less for equestrians in veterinary bills. They are locally adapted, and they contribute to the biodiversity and preserve cultures and traditions, and they're even classified as heritage in some places, or maybe they can be if we work on this part. And by fostering appreciation through education and engagement, we can ensure their survival for generations to come. So that's it. And that's the last slide. As I mentioned in the beginning, that I'm not only a photographer, but also a designer and marketing professional, and I'm working a lot of this topic about endangered horse breeds and educational content. And I can use my knowledge and experience to help organizations and individuals who need to learn about how to manage the communication in identity of horses and organizations, because basically all of these function as a brand, and you have to see a population, or you have to see a place as a brand. Like, for example, the Kalmar horse is a brand, the Icelandic horse is a brand. So you have to think more of a marketing perspective to help them. in a positive way, of course. So, of course, I do photography and videography, but they are key to raise awareness and create content for digital and printed publications. And I also offer consulting and coaching in any kind of creative topic and or concepts how horses and organizations or regions manage themselves as a brand, like the Dülmen case study or the Kamar case study. So that's it, the last slide. I thank you so much for joining tonight and sitting here for 1 hour listening to me. I will answer all your questions, and please feel free to connect with me. All the links are somewhere in the chat already. And if you ever want to experience horses in Europe, just hit me up and let's stay in touch. And thanks for this. I'm done here.
Cecile, yeah, I think that was an absolutely fascinating and beautiful presentation. I was absolutely glued to the computer the entire time, not wanting to log off and ignoring my corgi who was sitting next to me. She wasn't very happy with me about that, but that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. I did repost your links there in the chat, so you guys might want to grab those really quick if you haven't already. Chris and I will also put them in our post later today when we cover our presentations. And so I just have a few minutes here for a couple quick questions, Cecile.
Yes.
Abby is asking, I have been an admirer of your work for several years and would love to know if it's possible to get your book in Canada. Do you have that link to order your book? Because she doesn't want to use Amazon.
Yes, you can order through my website. And there's the links on my website, the Pixel Nomad, and Amazon also probably only works for Germany because of shipping costs. You can order them to Canada. However, maybe it's cheaper because shipping costs are very expensive to get a few copies and share the shipping with several people. But the publishing house, the link to the publishing house, they ship everywhere.
Perfect, great. And Abby is also asking, is it possible to access the list of at-risk horses?
Yes, so on my website, you will find the Forgotten Horses project, and there's a big list on this part. And also there is the list in my book. So I have it online and in the book, but online is easier to access, of course, yes. But
It's
I'm
fantastic.
updating my own list all the time, so I'm not updating it on the website all the time because it's a lot of
Okay.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with that many lines that you have listed on that. I was so impressed by that. My goodness. Stephanie says the International Society for Equine Science Conference is this year from July 23 to July 26 at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. She's wondering if you might be presenting.
That would be so interesting. I don't know. I mean, I need to travel to Colorado, and probably I would need a sponsor for the plane tickets. But I would love to. I would love to. I haven't heard about this conference. So,
Maybe
yeah.
look into it. They might be doing some Zoom presentations. You might be able to present via Zoom.
Thank you for this idea.
Krista is asking, how long did all this research take? How long have you been compiling this data?
That's a good question. I started 2018, and since then, so 6 years. The past 6 years are basically, I have dedicated myself to this project, and I'm updating all the time. And with each breed I meet and with each travel I do, I gain some insights because I talk to the people. And as I said, there is no network, there is no connection between all these little breeds and then with these people within the breed. So it's actually, you have to go in there and talk to them and understand the issues, the challenges, and also see it, because I know as a photographer, I know as a videographer, and I know because I use Instagram so much, I know how to fake messages. So I think it's so important to be there and see it with your own eyes before you judge. And that's what I like to do, because I see, okay, yeah, probably this is happening, but I'm not really sure if this is the truth. And that's a problem nowadays more than ever, that you have so much fake media also about horses and about telling the wrong story of horses, like the white horse, for example. It's a lot happening. So yeah, it's a big challenge, and I really want to continue, and I really want to travel more and be in more places.
It's certainly a challenge we face here in the United States, when somebody will share a photo out of one starving horse who might be
Yes.
elderly or ill on the range and claim that all of our wild horses appear that way, which we all know is untrue, and myself especially, having visited at least 50 herds here in the United States of our wild horses and haven't seen a starving horse yet. So yeah, you're absolutely right about the media. We all need to keep using the media to share facts and photos of our horses, how they actually look. Mary is wondering if she's curious about your background. I think you might have talked about this early on. I
Yeah.
can't remember. Do you have any degrees?
Yes, I have a bachelor degree in interface design, and I'm currently doing my master, finishing my master in brand management. So I'm just did creative stuff. I'm not a scientist in this sense. I'm a hobby scientist because I like to read all these stuff. But but I like to try to research thoroughly and not just superficially. So I try to read papers and to talk to scientists. And there are some very good scientists in Europe, but unfortunately, it's not very connected. This is all these papers they publish will never find into what people are actually reading because somehow the science world and the normal world is not really connected. And I think this maybe marketing could close this gap by doing publications, and this is what I'm trying.
Krista's wondering if there's a source for global photo tours.
No, there is no website that offers. So there are a lot of photographers offering tours here and there. Probably some of them are good, maybe others, I don't know. I cannot judge because I have not attended them. I just see their prices and I see that it's a big business in some places. For example, in the Camargue, it's a big business. I also offer photo tours, and it's quite complicated nowadays because everything got expensive so fast in the last 2 years, hotels, for example. So I reduced it a little bit more to weekend things, but photo tours, there should be some agency offering having all these photographers as contractors and offer these tours because there is not such an agency. So if somebody needs a business.
Right, that's a great idea, I think. Okay, everybody, Chris did post a link in the message box if you haven't seen it already to do our survey of the summit. If you could grab that and save it and give us your thoughts on the summit so far, or wait until after Monday when we're completed. And I'm going to just ask this one last question of Cecile and then let her go. Juliana is asking about and I probably pronounced this incorrectly, but the PRE horses, the Pura Raza Española.
It's correct. They look like the cousins of the American Wild Horse. Yes. So, yes, I know the PREs, of course. It's the Spanish breed, and that's such another interesting topic. So, if you think, because I've also read a lot about it, and I think people like to say, yeah, the Spanish horse went to America, and now all the American horses are basically the Spanish heritage, which is yes, correct, but no, the horse of today is not the same horse that went to the US or to North America in the 16th or 17th century. So the history of the Spanish horse is actually quite bigger than just having the PRE, the modern PRE we have today. And back in the days, you had so many different types which died out, and all these mountain horses were also part of these types. So the question is if these horses, which are the Mustangs or the Spanish heritage horses you have in North America nowadays, they are probably horses of these old extinct types you had in the Iberian Peninsula at this time. And because the Spanish horse also evolved into a different type we have today. So it's a very interesting topic. And I think the research just says, yes, Mustangs have Iberian DNA, but it does not say more than that. And I think this is also something, a field that needs to be researched much more.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your knowledge, Cecile.
Thank you so
Very
much
much
for having me.
appreciated. I know personally I am going to be ordering your book today
That's
and
good.
definitely going to be watching this. I mean, just for the videos and photos alone, it's absolutely gorgeous, but your knowledge is just extensive. And I know we all just really appreciated that today. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody else for joining us. We're going to end for now. And for those of you joining us for our next session, it will start in about 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. See you.
Thank
And
you.
feel free to connect with me.
Absolutely, 100%.